What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And today, we're going to be taking a look at the Izzet Aggro deck for the standard format. Now, I know what you're thinking. We've talked about a lot of the red-based aggro decks in the past, whether it's just been solely mono-red, whether it's been Gruul, whether it's been Rakdos, even Boros. We've kind of went through all the good color combinations up to this point, and we found out pretty early on that the mouse package plus Monstrous Rage is a very good start for a red-based aggro deck, and then you can just kind of fill in and, finish your own point-and-click venture how you see fit. But this Izzet aggro deck is completely different from that because it is completely devoid of the mouse package and kind of goes in on this like prowessy / spells based kind of aggro deck where it's just going to get a ton of card advantage. It's going to find what it needs. It's going to hit its land drops, and it's going to put massive amounts of pressure on you early on without having to play Heartfire Hero, Manifold Mouse, Emberheart Challenger, and those kind of cards, but still getting to play cards like Monstrous Rage because that is obviously one of the best red spells currently in the standard format. So we're going to be going over this Izzet aggro deck and see how it breaks the mold from all the other red aggro based strategies we're seeing, and kind of a breath of fresh air, I would say, kind of in the aggro archetype, even if the rest of the aggro decks in the format are, the same 16, 20 cards that we see across all those other decks. But before we get into the video and we talk about the Izzet aggro deck, if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos from me where we talk mainly about the modern and standard formats, everything to do with competitive Magic, as well as some other longer form videos for your viewing pleasure, please consider subscribing and ring that notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. It's a free, easy way to support me and my content. And if you would like to support me even further, you can go ahead and check out a few of the links in the description down below. We're going to have the deck list link down there, as well as my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Card23, where we go live on Twitch on the weekends. I try to do at least 2 to 3 live streams a week, and we end up playing a lot of things like Modern. That's current RCQ season, so we're going to be focusing pretty heavily on Modern, as well as playing some standards from here and there to kind of prepare for the regional championships going on in Minneapolis and Hartford. Not only that, we also have a podcast called the Casual Spikes Podcast, where me and my co-host Randy over at MTG with Randy talk a lot of the things to go on with competitive Magic, whether it's breaking down the metagames, breaking down these major tournaments, and trying to prepare you for your next RCQ or regional championship. So go ahead and check out that channel and subscribe over there as well. Lastly, I want to thank the sponsor of the channel, Manatraders. If you use my code in the description down below, you will get 5% off your monthly subscription, where you can go and rent cards, cards like such as in the Izzet aggro deck for, Magic Online, and you can go participate in leagues and other challenges to eventually qualify for the Pro Tour through the online circuit. Once again, I'd like to thank Manatraders for sponsoring the channel. Now let's go ahead and talk about this Izzet aggro deck, because it's pretty insane, So we'll start off with the creatures. As we said, it plays 8 creatures. Usually some of the other aggro decks, we start with just 12 creatures flat out, and then you see cards like Heartfire Hero, then you see Screaming Nemesis all make the main deck. So we usually see like about 20 creatures minimum, I would say. So about a third of the deck ends up being creatures. There's only 8 technically creatures in this deck, and you'll figure out technically why here in a minute. So we have 4 Monastery Swiftspear. This is essentially the red creature that has gotten cut from a lot of the mono red strategies, as at least in mono red, it felt like it was one of your worst creatures. But super simple, 1 mana, 1/2, haste prowess. Imagine telling someone that like Monastery Swiftspear would be like one of the worst red creatures in like a red aggro deck, especially when Monastery Swiftspear was released all the way back in the original Khans of Tarkir. That would have been absolutely mind-blowing. But, super simple, 1 mana, 1/2, haste prowess, very aggressive creature. And then we have Slickshot Show Off, which I remember when this was spoiled in Outlaws of Thunder Junction time, that this was going to be one of the best red creatures and probably one of the best red creatures of all time. 2 mana, Flying Haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and then plot for the same cost. So a lot of the times you're end up plotting this thing for 2 mana on turn 2. So then turn 3, cast it for free, and then start playing a bunch of your non-creature spells to boost its power and just get in for tons of damage. The fact that it has flying, the fact that it has haste, allows you to kind of set up those turns where you can get in a massive amount of damage on turn 3, forcing your opponent to leave up mana on turn 2 and, risking blown out by maybe like some kind of like Spell Pierce type effect or protection spell, which we would even see in kind of like some of the Gruul strategies more so in Modern than we would in Standard. So those are like your only creatures in the deck. They are very powerful. They're going to pay you off for casting spells, because not only are you going to get the benefit of the spell, but you're also going to give these creatures either +1/+1 in the case of Monastery Swiftspear, or +2/+0 in the case of Slickshot Show Off. And so there is technically, I would say 8 other creatures in the deck, even though you kind of have to work a little bit more for them. Stormchaser's Talent, really not so much. 1 mana, we're pretty, acquainted with this card thanks to a lot of the self-bounce decks in the format. But for 1 blue, when it enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. For 4 mana, you level it up to level 2. You can return target instant sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And then on the last level, level 6, whenever you cast a sorcery spell, you create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. So definitely what we've seen from a lot of these self-bounce decks, like you're essentially abusing the first level and the second level, being able to bounce this to then end up making another token, and then potentially paying 4 mana to go get your this town ain't big enough, to then kind of get these loops going where you bounce like Storm Chaser's Talon, another one of your opponent's things, and you play another creature. You're getting prowess triggers on your other otters, allowing you to get in for pretty big swings for like 3 or 4 damage on each otter. But in this deck in particular, there isn't really a way that you can bounce your own Storm Chaser's Talent, and you're kind of fine with that, because once you get it up to level 6 and you have all these other cantrips type effects, and then you're making otters on top of just getting more and more spells to play, making them a lot bigger, does kind of just snowball into an insurmountable amount of pressure onto your opponent. So Storm Chaser's Talent here, we're not abusing just necessarily it entering the battlefield and making a 1/1 over and over and over and over again. We are looking to kind of do this and then get some value from the level 2, and then of course increase our value exponentially by getting it to level 3. The one card that this deck got from the new set is Cori-Steel Cutter. Now, Randy over at MTG with Randy brought this up to me on our Casual Spikes podcast. We were talking about various different cards, and I really like this card a lot. So 2 mana, equipped creature gets +1/+1, has trample and haste. This is already pretty good, I would say, and it equips for 1 and a red. So a little bit harder to equip than just regular equip 2, but getting to put this on like a Swift Spear or a Slickshot Show Off, or even like a Storm Chaser, a Storm Chaser's Talented Otter is going to be pretty good, because it's going to be a 2/2 off the rip with trample and haste, and then as you cast more spells, you're going to get more prowess triggers, meaning it's going to be a lot harder to kind of block this creature. Again, just giving a creature trample in this current format with aggro is absolutely amazing. But it has the flurry of mechanic, which says that whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you create a 1/1 monk creature token with prowess. You may attach this equipment to it. So not only can you just play Cori-Steel Cutter like on turn 2, or we'll say like on turn 3, and then end up casting something like a Slickshot Show Off, you're going to then end up making, Slickshot Show Off's going to enter the battlefield. You're going to also make a 1/1 monk with prowess and potentially have another mana left over to cast another spell, and then you're going to be able to get in for tons of damage with Cori-Steel Cutter plus the Slickshot Show Off. So there's just kind of some things there. You can even just play Cori-Steel Cutter like on turn 3 and then play another 1 mana spell, trigger it that way, not necessarily setting up a Slickshot Show Off. But this just does a lot, and it's not like it's all stipulated on if you don't have a monk already, then you create one and then attach it to it. You get to do this on every single turn that you cast your second spell, which in this deck with all the cantrips, you are able to kind of cast 2 spells on your turn, then cast 2 spells on your opponent's turn, then cast 2 spells on your turn, and then just kind of keep this advantage going where you're making a 1/1 every turn, and of course you're getting the benefit of all your spells as well, allowing you to remain aggressive, build out a board, and eventually get to a point where, hey, I have 3 or 4 monks in play. Now I'm just going to start going Monstrous Rage. I'm going to cast Burst Lightnings. I'm going to cast, stock ups and things like that, and just get to the point where, hey, you're going to have to deal with a board full of, 3/3s, 4/4s, and 5/5s that a lot of decks aren't really going to be able to handle. And sure, maybe they can beat 1 token in combat, but can they beat 3 or 4 other ones? Especially when 2 or 3 of those tokens end up having trample, and you just push so much damage at one time while also really never losing cards in hand, if that makes any sense. Like you're always just kind of drawing cards off of your other spells that you're playing. So rounding out the spells being the most important thing, because we talked about Cori-Steel Cutter wanting you to cast spells, period. Storm Chaser's Talent obviously making prowess otters, and then of course Slickshot and Monastery Swift Spear growing. What are we playing exactly? Well, we have 4, 8, 12, 14, 15 1-drops in this deck. Spell Pierce being the we'll call it the worst one, for the fact that you have to counter a non-creature spell. Technically, you can counter your own spell to get like some prowess triggers or whatever, and sometimes like being able to cast Into the Floodmaw, or casting an opt and then like spell piercing your own opt and paying for it, like ends up working out like decently well, or not even like having to pay for it at all, just to get +3, 4, 5 power in play can be pretty decent. But Spell Pierce probably being one of your worst cards. It does give you a play, on if you don't necessarily play Swift Spear or Storm Chaser's Talent on turn 1. This is just kind of fine to leave up to counter your opponent's turn 2 play. It's also just a very efficient removal spell in a format where seemingly we are pretty fast with the self-bounce decks being able to kill relatively quickly, as well as a lot of the other aggro decks that are just looking to go, Heartfire Hero into Manifold Mouse into Monstrous Rage plus burn spells. So Spell Pierce is definitely pretty good there, in my opinion. Burst Lightning, Monstrous Rage, Opt are the other 4 ofs in this deck. Burst Lightning, deal 2 damage, and if it's kicked, deal 4. So you can spend 5 mana to deal 4 damage to somebody. This is just a good way to close out the game while also being a nice early game play. Monstrous Rage, giving a creature +2/+0 until end of turn, and then creating a monster roll token attached to that creature, giving a permanent +1/+1 and trample is absolutely massive. Not only can you use this to kind of survive combat, especially when you kind of stack prowess on top of this, it essentially gives a creature, instead of +3/+1, it gives it +4/+2, which a lot of times is more than enough. And if you have other spells, it's just absolute gravy. You're going to end up dealing tons of damage to your opponent, blowing them out in blocks, and then just having a permanent trampling threat for the rest of the game, or really for as long as the monster roll tokens on that creature. And of course, Opt, super simple, 1 mana, scry 1, and then draw a card. Totally fine in this deck, just being able to, again, have a very cheap spell that is then going to replace itself and give you a little bit of selection as well to try and find your land drops or just to find other spells. And then Into the Floodmaw allows you to return a creature to its opponent's hand, and then if you promise a gift, which is giving them a tapped fish, then you can return target non-land permanent and opponent controls to the owner's hand instead. Just as a one of, super nice, super clean here. Mana base, really simple, 4 island, 4 mountain, a Restless Spire, which is a land that comes into play taps for blue or red. For a blue and red, you can turn it into a 2/1 red elemental with as long as your turn. This creature has first strike, and whenever it attacks, you scry 1. Just kind of a nice little mana sink to, add another threat to the board that's going to be pretty hard to beat in combat. Then you have 4 Riverspire Verge, taps for a red, activate, you can tap for a blue if you have control of mountain or an island. Shivan Reef, the blue-red pain land, taps for a colorless mana, and then you deal damage if you tap for a blue or a red. And Spire Bluff Canal enters unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, taps for a blue or red, super simple there. In the sideboard, we have Dive Down, nice little protection spell, 1 mana, give a creature +0/+3, and it gains hexproof until end of turn. Ghost Vacuum to mess with the graveyards, another Into the Floodmaw. Lithomantic Barrage, getting able to deal 5 damage to a target creature or planeswalker if it's white or blue, 1 damage to anything else and can't be countered. 1 more Spell Pierce, bringing our total up to 3. 4 Torch the Tower, 2 Negate, and 2 Sunspine Links in the sideboard. And that is the Izzet Aggro deck for the standard format. Overall, what can I say? I say it all the time. This deck is really sweet. It's a nice change of pace from the other aggro decks of the format. Sure, you would say you're a little bit more susceptible, I would say, to the removal spells, because again, you're not necessarily, picking up and playing the Storm Chaser's talent over and over again, and as we kind of alluded to earlier, you don't necessarily want to be doing that in this type of strategy. On top of that too, with Cori-Steel Cutter, if you just have one of these in play, and I believe they're not legendary either, so these are going to kind of stack as well. So imagine having 2 of these in play, and you're just making 2 1/1s every other turn, or 2 1/1s every turn, and being able to kind of equip to those creatures, attack with the ones that are already equipped, make 2 new ones, and re-equip those, and you just kind of generate an insane amount of value from multiple Cori-Steel Cutters. So it's like one of those equipments that you're totally fine with drawing multiple copies of. Slickshot Show Off, Monster Swift Spear are going to allow you to get in tons of damage, and this is a pretty good deck that can punish you and your opponent for some very slow starts. Potentially with Slickshot Show Off as well, you can just kind of, punk your opponent out in that way, where you play like a Slickshot Show Off, and then you go something like Opt, Monstrous Rage, like Burst Lightning, and end up, getting a 7 power, 10 power Slickshot Show Off that's going to end up being bigger, and you kind of got a little bit of card advantage there as well, so you're going to be able to kind of go absolutely crazy in, stock up here as well. We kind of glossed over Ren's Resolve and stock up here, these kind of being other ways of getting card advantage. This, Ren's Resolve, exiling top 2 cards until your next turn, you can play those cards. Super simple, ends up being very powerful here. And then we have 4 stock up. Look at the top 5, put 2 in your hand, put the rest in the body library in order. Like, this card's an absolute slam dunk home run and looks very good here in this blue-red aggro strategy. So definitely worth trying out. Again, if you want to try it out, I have the deck list linked in the description down below. And if you are looking to acquire some of these cards, you can go ahead and rent them off of Manatraders. Again, using my code in the description down below for 5% off your monthly subscription. If you're not already signed up for Manatraders, I do greatly appreciate all of that support. Of course, consider subscribing to the channel, ring the notification bell, so you know when future videos get posted, because again, we do post a lot about these standard and modern formats. And with the standard regional championships coming up, and of course the modern RCQ in full swing, and we're kind of getting a lot of these other competitive events and stuff going on, definitely want to stick around and check those out if you are interested. But yeah, that's going to do it for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next one.